Hey, welcome in, everybody. Good afternoon. Gabe DeArmond here. This is I guess for now, the PowerMizzou.com podcast. We're doing this a little differently this week. There will be a video version available. You can watch that on our YouTube channel on replay. You can listen on the podcast. It'll be downloaded to your podcast feeds by the time most of you are hearing this. So hopefully, if you're watching or listening to this, you already know who I am. The other person on your screen you may or may not know. I will introduce you. This is Nick Garner. He is the relatively new CEO of Every True Tiger Foundation, which is now Mizzou's preferred NIL collective. And first off, Nick, appreciate you spending some time here to educate the people and frankly, probably me on some of this stuff. And I guess to open things up, I just want to give you the floor and let you tell these people kind of who you are, what you're doing, and what exactly Every True Tiger Foundation is.
Yeah. Well, Gabe, thanks for having me, and glad to be here. And I'll tell you a little bit about myself. I really got going here with Every True Tiger Foundation December 1st. So it has been it's probably been about 45 days for me. Just a little personal history. I've spent nearly 20 years in the collegiate sports industry. I spent, 16 years prior to this with Learfield on the multimedia rights side. I was most recently helping develop strategy for Learfield nationally out of their Dallas office. Prior to that, I was the GM at Mizzou Sports Properties here in Columbia, before moving to Dallas about 3.5 years ago. So really familiar with Columbia, but in my previous role with Learfield, I was helping develop and build their NIL strategy for the past probably 18 to 24 months before the opportunity came, as collectives have been being built and having my nose in that space, this opportunity to get back to Columbia and back to Mizzou, where we were before came. And so, like I said, I started December 1, just moved to town about a month ago. And so happy to be here.
And for those of you watching on YouTube, the website address for Every True Tiger Foundation is going to scroll across the bottom of your screen throughout here, everytruetiger.org. If you're listening on audio, I'm sure we'll say it 2 or 3 times. Hopefully you can write it down or memorize those very few syllables. Nick, we're going to treat this to start out with, and I think this is fair because even our listeners who are fairly educated in college sports, a lot of people go, what's an NIL collective? Why would I donate to this? What is this? Is this just, is this the way to get money to these players? So what do you guys, broad level, 30,000 foot view? What's the role?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really good question by anybody. If anyone, I'll tell you, I laugh, but it's true. If anybody says that they're experts in NIL, they're probably lying to you, because it hasn't been around long enough for any of us to say that we're truly experts. And it's changing, candidly. I mean, it's changing every week. It seems like there's something new. There's a, NIL, the intent really behind it in 2019, when the legislation was passed to allow student athletes to really monetize off their name, image, and likeness. The intent behind that really was to afford them that opportunity to really do something that had not for decades, there was no monetization off of that. It was just, these guys were coming, they were putting in 40 hours a week in practice and going to class and coming and competing, representing their universities well. And that was it. And so really 18 months ago, that changed. And so now it's okay. The collective portion that became an opportunity for groups to really form ways to create opportunities for the student athletes to find NIL opportunities. Because NIL, just because it got unlocked and it was like, okay, well, these kids can monetize, there was still really not a route for them. It had to be found, like, okay, well, how do we find a route? It's not a pay for play. So these kids are not, getting paid to play. They're getting paid to utilize their name, image, and likeness. So that could be through businesses, through nonprofits, through a number of avenues, kids' birthday parties, shout outs. There's just so many different things that could happen. And so, collectives begin to form as an effort that, groups, a lot of it started with donors, passionate donors, but really an opportunity for groups to come together and create the resources there to find NIL opportunities for student athletes. And that's really the genesis of how it started. And now it's become, there's so much more, and you hear a lot of this, talk about, recruitment and how does it, fall into that, and what kind of kids are we getting to come? And I think any of us would say we want Mizzou to compete at the highest level. At ETTF, what we want to do is find as many opportunities to be attractive to student athletes that are enrolled at Mizzou. Are they going to have as many opportunities to utilize their NIL to create opportunities for them? And that's our hope.
So before we get into some more specific questions, there's been a little bit of confusion among Missouri fans because there were some different collectives, and Advancing Missouri Athletes was out there, and now it's ETTF. Can you explain kind of what you guys are doing going forward, how that's working with what used to exist, and kind of what the structure is for a Missouri fan who just says, I don't know, man, I got money, I want to help out, but what is this thing?
Right. Yeah, that's another good one. I think if you look across the country, you see collectives have taken different paths. There's various for-profit entities. Now there's the nonprofit side. What we did when, Advancing Missouri Athletes is really where we started in the original form, and as more of a for-profit entity. And Advancing Missouri Athletes, AMA, as we want to call it, does still exist. It is still there. It's a portion of Every True Tiger Foundation. But really moving over into ETTF, we created a nonprofit foundation that really, the real reason behind that is to create an opportunity for donors to feel like, okay, you can make contributions to ETTF, tax deductible contributions to ETTF, and you can contribute to our student athletes that contract with us, impacting their community directly through the work with nonprofits. And so really ETTF's mission is to really align a student athlete with a nonprofit to help advance their mission. So even if it's, a chili cook-off that's happening at, Big Brothers, Big Sisters, or, whatever it might be, that we could offer opportunities for our student athletes to help promote that mission, help promote that event, help promote what's happening with these nonprofits. And then it becomes something that those opportunities create the opportunity to receive compensation for utilizing their NIL. So we still exist on the for-profit side with AMA as businesses, and those brand type initiatives are there. But the nonprofit really opens it up to everybody. Everybody to be a part of it, everybody to say, hey, you know what? I make a charitable contribution here. Now I see what Mizzou's doing with their student athletes, and I'd love to help them out. I can make the same tax deductible gift to ETTF.
So I think for Missouri fans, the most visible, what they would associate NIL with is, hey, there's a bag of potato chips and Luther Burden has his picture on it. So explain to people, is that separate or is that different than what would happen if they donate? I mean, for example, the potato chip company is not coming to you and saying, here's money, we want Luther. That's a separate deal from what they would be donating to. Is that correct?
Yeah, that particular deal, it's a good example, has been run separate. We always encourage our student athletes that, your contract with ETTF is not exclusive. We would encourage student athletes to go and find opportunities. And as those opportunities arise, they may. I will tell you that because of that AMA existence, and as we build ETTF, that we do want that opportunity for brands to be able to come as well and say, hey, guys, can you help us find opportunities for these student athletes? Or we have a particular brand that we would love to align a Mizzou student athlete with. And there will be a part of ETTF, Gabe, that does work that corporate side to help create really, as that preferred collective of Mizzou athletics, we want it to be like a one-stop shop for people. So we want people to know, if you're a brand, you can come here. If you're just a general fan that wants to be a part of it, you'll have that opportunity as well. And I think that'll create the most seamless. We want to be that household name where people just say, hey, this is where I go to align with the student athlete and to create NIL opportunities.
So for somebody, and I do not want to by any means downplay the net worth of our subscribers or our listeners. We may have some of the wealthiest people in the world listening. I don't know. But for those people who maybe don't have millions of dollars, don't own their own business, but just say, look, I've got $500. I wanted to go to Mizzou Athletics. I think this is the way that it most impacts Mizzou Athletics. First of all, how would they go about doing that? And second of all, then kind of what happens with their money? I mean, how much control do they have over who it goes to, where it goes, and what happens with it after that?
Yeah, I think that's great. And so what I'll say is that, and this is probably a longer answer, but I think it's important for, really your board members as they see this, because we're really just scratching the surface of where I think the Power Mizzou folks are a huge part of where this collective goes. And mainly because of the passion for Mizzou. I think there's really three, what I'll call them, key pillars as to how we're building this collective. One, there is kind of a larger donor side that's important. You need those major gifts, and some of those might come from Power Mizzou. Some may not. As you said, I don't know, but there might be that fit. But the second really pillar, that they're all equally important, but the second pillar is really this membership-based opportunity that anyone, they could say, hey, look, I want to just give you $5 a month, or I want to give you $50 a month, or $100, whatever that might be. That model, that membership model is there and can be done even today through everytruetiger.org, as you mentioned on the top, and we'll probably talk about it a lot. And hopefully every time we do this, we talk about, everytruetiger.org. But the point is that you can go on there now today. And I know you and I are working on this, and we're going to better define for Power Mizzou members what that means for them as far as incentives and things like that. So everybody doesn't have to rush there today, because I do think there's going to be some opportunity for your folks to really jump in and collectively have a little mini collective to the collective, which I think is kind of cool. But that third pillar is the corporate side, which we mentioned, brands, businesses, things like that will exist. And there are business owners on your board too. And they may say, hey, I have a business. I want, to receive a little bit more pub because I have a Mizzou student athlete. So those pieces, though, right now exist. Now, I want to talk about directing the funds. So you talk about, well, how can they, know where their dollar is going? And I think what's really important is that this is the first time, and this is really cool, and I get excited talking about it to people, because when over the years you ask for, donations, you ask for sponsorship, things like that, there's not a lot of ways to direct that money, right? Specifically to a program, to a kid. I mean, you can generally put things toward a capital campaign. You can put it toward, a scholarship fund. You can do a lot of really good things. But NIL is the first real opportunity. And through these collectives, and really through, in this case, everytruetiger.org, you can select your program. And when you go to everytruetiger.org, what you'll see on the website that's just been redesigned and coming along really nicely is the first part that someone will select is the program they want to support. So you go through the program you want to support. You say, hey, I'm a women's golf fan. I want to support the women's golf program. I go in there. I can select how much I would like to donate. Is it a one-time gift, monthly donation? What is that? And then we can direct those funds. Now, there's also ways, in that third pillar to say, hey, I have this, business that I'd really love to see X student athlete, because they align with, my business, I'd like to line them up. Absolutely. We can go and create that opportunity, offer that NIL opportunity to a specific athlete that makes sense. And we can do that. So there's so many ways now that you can really get very granular with your donation and where your dollar's going. And then in turn, what you'll see is the student athletes are doing things that are really impactful in the community with organizations that are helping advance their mission. And so it's very, like I said, very granular. And I think that's what donors, big and small, will see out of the collective.
I did not warn you in our pre-show meeting that I was going to specifically ask this, but it just occurred to me. Do you guys have a roster of athletes or anything? I mean, if somebody says, "Hey, I want to, this specific kid," is a Missouri athlete automatically kind of aligned with you guys because he is enrolled at Mizzou, he or she is enrolled at Mizzou, or do they have to, come to you? I guess, how does that work?
That's a really good question. So because we are that preferred collective of Mizzou athletics, we will be able to go to every athlete, but because NIL deals are specific and within the confines of the NCAA and what guidelines are set, we have to contract with the student athlete on every opportunity that we do. So if we have, if a student athlete agrees to help promote a charity and we're going to do something every month for that charity, we'll typically re-sign a contract every month with them. And so, but our access is to all 550 student athletes at Mizzou. So if someone said, "Hey, I have this, a softball player or a wrestler or a football player or a women's basketball player specific," then we could go and offer them that deal opportunity to create it however we want to create it. So there's no one really off limits from that standpoint.
Okay, and then another one, and look, fair or not, some people see things like this or even charitable donations, whatever, and think, okay, well, I gave $10, but how much of that $10 actually goes to where I want it to go to, and how much, goes to pay salaries and costs and this and that. So if somebody gives money to ETTF, like, do you have a ballpark, like, does that money all go to a student athlete or how that works?
Yeah. So our goal long term, Gabe, is that we spend 90% of everything that we collect, 90 cents on every dollar goes toward the student athlete. We hope over time that that'll even thin itself. There are certainly costs that, like you said, there are salaries, there are, we have a staff, we have operational expenses to execute. There's certain events that we're going to put on, things like that. But at the end of the day, our hope and our goal is that we will 90% or more will go to the student athlete. And that's really how we've tried to kind of formulate that. And we understand there's a build-up process to that. So you kind of have to build it. And, my thought, and it's probably the thought of many in the NIL space right now, is, as you can see, it's changing, by the week. It's, crazy some of the things you see and hear. I expect that there will be exponential growth in this space from, just contracts that you see with athletes to amounts raised by collectives or other NIL outfits over the next probably 18 to 24 months. I mean, it's probably going to be exponential before it really hits a plateau. And we want to be really prepared for when we hit the plateau, which is really what the market's going to be, that we're operating efficiently. And so to answer your question, that's really where we want to get, is that where we can confidently say, look, most of your dollar is going straight to the student athlete, which is another reason, Gabe, that the nonprofit side made a lot of sense to us, because we're not geared toward generating profit. What we're geared for is getting as many opportunities into the student athletes' arms as we can. Yes, we have to operate, but outside of that, our goal is to raise the money and get the money out. And that's really, very important as it comes to trust from donors, businesses, any of that.
Once again, if you're watching on YouTube, you know this, but if you're listening on the podcast, I want to remind you, I'm Gabe DeArmond. The voice you're hearing is Nick Garner, CEO of Every True Tiger Foundation, Mizzou's now preferred NIL Collective. And Nick, we've talked about doing this hopefully kind of regularly over time to update people as it evolves. But I've got three more that I definitely want to ask you here the first time we're talking. You mentioned the staff. People are hearing from you. You're kind of the head of this organization, but there's obviously a couple of familiar names involved. Just kind of who's involved in this, and what does the organization look like from your guys' side, and any specific people or roles that you want fans to know about.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's important. Is outside of myself and really, which is kind of a fresh face and new to a lot of people. What is probably not fresh and new are the other two guys that are really helping us. And one is Lawrence Bowers, who's our executive director. I know a lot of folks on this board know Lawrence. Former Mizzou great basketball player. He's really kind of helping generate a lot of what our marketing, is going to look like, our fundraising, things like that. So Lawrence is going to be around. You'll see him. He's on your board. I know he is, and loves to be locked into Power Mizzou folks. And then our director of ops is Bud Sasser, who, Bud's a, former Mizzou football player. Bud's role really primarily is the execution part. There's a whole side of this that everybody doesn't, know about, which is, how do you execute with all these athletes? How do you get contracts done? How do they get paid? How do they, how do you make sure that they do everything they're supposed to, that everything's disclosed to the school, to the compliance department, that they understand, taxes? Like, what are these kids? I mean, these are 18 to 22-year-old kids primarily. So we really have to make sure that we prepare them. And, Bud helps from that standpoint. He's also a second-year law student in the Mizzou Law School. So, but both Bud and Lawrence have a really unique story, and that's the fact that they've been student athletes before NIL existed. And so I think that's really, to them, it's great to see their investment in it and their passion to create the opportunities for Mizzou student athletes.
I know also that Mizzou hired Brandon Lee, a former football player, to do NIL on their side. And I think it was late August, the state of Missouri passed a law that, I'll be honest, I kind of understand, but don't completely understand, basically allowing the school to work with you guys. Can you explain to fans how that works? I mean, what kind of interaction you're allowed to have with, whether it's Desiree Reed-Francois, Eli Drinkwitz, Dennis Gates, head coach X, and how involved they're able to be in this side of this because of that law that was passed last year?
Yeah, that is in the state of Missouri, that is a huge benefit to what you see happening right now. And I think what, a lot of fans and even folks on your board have probably been wondering for quite some time is, one, do we even have a legitimate collective? Like, what's happening? But these are the first steps, and you and I know, we've talked about it. What's coming. The folks on your board are going to see is over the coming months how Every True Tiger emerges as that collective. But we have been operating for quite some time in collaboration with athletics, and so Brandon, you referenced Brandon Lee, who really is Mizzou's in-house NIL. What I'll call him, he's the go-to guy from the athletic standpoint. And so, Brandon and I and our staff are really in lockstep on communication with the athletes. Really, Brandon's focus is going to be on, helping with NIL education, really being able to be around the athletes every day, talking about what they need to be prepared for on NIL opportunities. There's things that he can really spend time and dig in with them. It could be financial literacy. It could be things like that. But we're going to work together with athletics to create educational opportunities for the student athletes, so they don't just leave Mizzou and not know what's going on. We want them to leave with maybe a little something in their pocket, but really understanding how to manage their finances, how to file taxes, how to get their taxes paid. Things like that are really important. The communication with Desiree, with Coach Drinkwitz and Coach Gates is tremendous. We have to be in lockstep with them as well, just so that we understand the mission and the values and the direction, and that we're all going in the same direction. And I think that for us is super important. And so Desiree and her staff, have been very open in communicating kind of, hey, this is where we're headed and we need alignment. And that's what we're here to give them. And we want to, obviously we would not be this preferred collective if they didn't have trust in where we were headed, and trust that they can have an outfit, because they can talk about it now. You see it around the country. Athletic directors are now, and coaches, they're putting a lot of energy behind, hey, support this collective. And I think that's primarily because just what NIL has become. It's the number one topic in the NCAA right now, outside of the transfer portal, which does kind of get, intermixed a lot, but that topic is huge for administrators or coaches. So we're in steady communication with our coaches and administration on how we move forward.
I intentionally saved this one for last because I think, you try to bury the lead so people listen to the end, but this is what most people, I think, want to know. Since this went into law, NCAA rule, whatever you want to call it, a lot of Missouri fans and a lot of fans at schools like Missouri across the country have said, well, how the hell are we going to compete in this, right? How some of the numbers they're seeing for some of these kids at places across the country, a lot of Missouri fans think we can't do this. So this is your chance. Why can Missouri compete in this space in the Southeastern Conference?
Oh, it is, and I'm glad you saved that for last, because this is a really big one. I think that the point that I think Missouri fans need to understand is that Mizzou has such a passionate fan base. So you can say what you want, and you can say the same thing about pretty much any school in the SEC, minus maybe one or two. But that passion is what drives fans to just keep coming back, right? Midst of good or bad, we just keep coming back, keep supporting. That's really what makes collectives what they are and unique, is that it's an opportunity to show, okay, we can kind of bring our resources together to create opportunities for kids as they come here. They're going to see, hey, the opportunities I have on an NIL standpoint at Mizzou are as competitive as anywhere in the SEC. And we can do that through a number, as I said, a number of different ways, from donors to membership to businesses. There are so many ways that people can come together and create competitive opportunities. I think what you'll find, the numbers that are out there right now, a lot of it's overblown. I mean, a lot of it right now simply, it is, once the dust settles, people realize, hey, a lot of what they're reading and seeing is really not accurate. Because I can tell you right now that there have not been, like, NIL opportunities have not been an issue right now for Mizzou. And you could probably ask Coach Drinkwitz and Coach Gates, because the idea for both of them is, hey, you come to play for the name on your jersey, and we will be competitive creating NIL opportunities for you. And that's what we have done and will continue to do, is create those opportunities. And at the end of the day, we are always going to do what we say we're going to do. So we're never going to promise opportunities to a player without knowing that we have the resources to do it, number one. And then knowing that at the end of that time period, that they feel like, hey, these guys were authentic, they were truthful, they helped me find opportunities, they helped me figure out how to manage my finances, they helped me figure out how to do taxes. And by the way, I'm really talented, and I helped Mizzou win some ball games too, in the process. So I think for us is not believing that just because Alabama has 100,000 people in their stadium on a Saturday, that they have any advantage. This is really this opportunity is an opportunity to almost kind of even the playing field a little bit, because we can actually come together as a group, and we can't do it with one person. And I think anybody that sees collectives that are founded on 1, 2, or 3 people will not last in the long term. But what will are the collectives that have everyone involved, every stakeholder that cares about Mizzou. If they're involved, then we can create opportunities that no one can.
And again, I want to tell you guys watching or listening, like Nick and I have had some conversations. We do plan to have some ways for PowerMizzou.com subscribers specifically to get involved, and hopefully some extra benefits for you guys. But this is probably going to go out to general Missouri fans as well beyond just our site. So Nick, just want to kind of end by saying, is there anything, at least in this introductory stage, that you want fans to know about that you think is important that we haven't talked about?
No, I mean, I would say specific to your listeners and the guys watching here, Power Mizzou specifically, I do want to say that, we wouldn't be having this conversation, and Gabe and I wouldn't have developed this, relationship and understanding if we didn't see the importance of Power Mizzou and, really the folks that are passionate about Mizzou. And I think as time goes, we just want everyone to be able to support in some capacity. And if we do that, I saw this was a little ridiculous, but there was something on Twitter today, Florida, the NIL Collective, again, making waves, but they, said, there's, I don't know what the number was. It was something ridiculous. If there's, this many millions Florida fans, if 10% of them gave $10 a month, that'd be $5 million a month or something that they said. And while that's probably really overblown and they've got some, cleaning up to do to get their people to want to be a part of it, the reality is it did show what happens when we all come together, right? And in any capacity. And so I would just encourage people that whatever that is, and now that we've gone 501c3, whatever contributions you're out making, consider how you can make an impact on Mizzou student athletes, and then in turn create competitive opportunities for Mizzou.
So again, guys, if you want to donate now, you can do that at everytruetiger.org. If you want to hang on to just a little bit, we'll have some stuff specifically for you guys. But Nick, appreciate you taking some time, man.
Yeah, thanks, Gabe. I appreciate it. Look forward to doing it again.
All right, guys, I'm going to have Nick on time to time on this show, and we're going to kind of keep you guys up to date on what's going on from Mizzou's side, NIL wise, and hopefully we'll be able to do some things going forward as well. But thanks for listening. Talk to you next time.